question on Instagram recently about Prince Harry and if he was still a prince. And the short answer to that is yes, he definitely is. But it made me think about how there's a lot of confusion happening around Prince Harry's title, and more importantly, around the titles of his children, both Archie and his soon-to-be-born daughter. And really, this topic can be quite confusing and complex. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down how royal titles work, and then I'm going to be talking about Archie's title or lack of title, and what could possibly happen in the future. So my name is Ellie Dashwood, and this is my channel where I talk about history, literature, and apparently noble titles in England. So if you like any of those things, please subscribe. I have to actually drink my tea. Last time I had tea in a video, I never actually drank it. So if you watch the famous interview that Oprah did with both Meghan and Harry, then you'll probably remember Meghan talking about how Archie was not given a title. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about, some people have been saying that Meghan was wrong with what she said about her son's title, and I see where they're coming from. I can also kind of see where Meghan's coming from, and so I'm going to be addressing whether Meghan was wrong about the title later in this video too. And one thing I really want to clarify that was said in that interview was about how Archie wasn't given a title, and I want to say that I'm pretty sure what Meghan was talking about was he was not given a royal title of prince, and he wasn't given HRH status, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit too. And so him being given a royal title is separate from what Archie is entitled to use, which is a courtesy title because his father is a duke and his father has a lesser title. So of course, Harry is the Duke of Sussex. He also holds the title the Earl of Dumbarton, which if you've seen my video on what is an English lord, you'll know that the oldest son has the ability to use one of his father's lesser titles as something called a courtesy title. And so actually, if Meghan and Harry chose, they could have their son referred to as Lord Dumbarton. Meanwhile, when his sister is born, she has the privilege of being known as Lady First Name, whatever they name her, and their last name is of course Mountbatten Windsor. So she would be Lady First Name Mountbatten Windsor and would normally be called Lady, her first name, which is the same sort of courtesy title we see that the daughters of the Earl of Grantham and Downton Abbey have. And that's why they're known as Lady Sybil, Lady Mary, and Lady Edith. However, at this current time, it does not appear that they are using the courtesy titles for Archie. He is listed simply as Master Archie Mountbatten Windsor in the court circular. And so also, if you want to know about Master, because that's not really, at least in common use in the United States, that is a title used for male children. And I actually cover all of that in a video called Does Mr. Darcy Have a First Name?, where I go into forms of address, both in Regency times, but a lot of them are still used in formal settings today, like Master. So basically, just to sum that up, Archie could be using the title Lord Dumbarton. He's currently not right now, and we don't really know why. That information has not been shared, but I also don't think that is a title that they would have taken away from him, because that would be totally against tradition and make zero sense whatsoever. Meanwhile, I think what she was talking about is he wasn't given a prince or princess title or HRH status, and right now is when we're going to delve into who gets that traditionally and why Archie doesn't have it. So first up, we have to talk about the concept of the royal family to begin with. Like any family, generation after generation, it grows bigger and bigger and bigger, because kids keep having more kids who keep having more kids. So in a royal family, they have to draw the line at some point, right? Of who gets to be part of the royal family and who is just sort of their more distant descendants. Otherwise, you would have half of England running around with prince and princess HRH titles, or more. There's this thing that says pretty much anyone of European descent actually descended from Charlemagne. So pretty much everyone in Europe would be HRH prince and princess if we never cut anybody off. So the royal family had to decide exactly how many generations out from the monarch, descendant-wise, do you still get to keep your royal status. So the royal family has actually standardized who gets a title and who doesn't, and they did this by means of something called letters patent. Before we delve into letters patent, which is actually a really interesting concept, I'm going to take a bite of this cookie. So what are letters patent? Well, they're essentially an official proclamation issued by the monarch that can manage different things, including the usage of royal titles, and also it creates peerages. So for example, if the queen wanted to create a new earl, she would issue a letters patent that essentially says this guy gets to be an earl now, and his descendants get to inherit that from him. So these letters patent also govern who gets to use a royal title. So the last major royals patent that governs who gets automatically these titles was issued by King George V in 1917. So yeah, it's over 100 years ago. And so essentially, since a royal patent stays in effect until a future monarch changes it, it's still largely in effect. There has been a change slightly to it, which I'm going to cover in a minute, but let's look at what this 1917 patent says. So the patent that the king issues says, "The king has been pleased by letters patent under the Great Seal of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, bearing the date the 30th ultimo, to define the styles and titles to be borne henceforth by members of the royal family." So he's saying from this point on, this who gets to use royal titles. "It is declared by the letters patent that the children of any sovereign of the United Kingdom and the children of the sons of any such sovereign and the eldest living son of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales shall have and at all times hold and enjoy the style, title, or attribute of royal highness, with their titular dignity of prince or princess prefixed to their respective Christian names or with their other titles of honor." Okay, so let's just pause here for a bit and break down what this is saying. So essentially it's saying that the people who get to use the title HRH, prince or princess, are the following: the children of the sovereign. Of course, currently Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip have 4 children. They are, of course, Prince Charles, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. And so all 4 of these children get to use HRH, prince or princess. Okay, and then it says that the children of the sons of any such sovereign. Okay, so this means that only the children of a son get HRH, prince or princess, while the children of daughters do not. And we actually see this in the current royal family. Of course, the children of Charles are Harry and William. They both have the titles. So to answer that question about Prince Harry's title, he is still definitely a prince, and him and his wife are still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And in fact, they are still both royal highnesses. The statement put out by the Queen says that they're not currently using their HRH titles, but that does not mean that they still don't own them per se. They are still both HRH, but they're just currently not using those titles in public because they've stepped away from being full-time working royals. I hope that answers the question on Prince Harry's titles. What are you doing? Are you just staring at the camera now? This is my cat. Who knows what he's doing? Then the children of Andrew, who is also a son, have the titles. They are, of course, Beatrice and Eugenie. And technically the children of Prince Edward do too, but they're not currently using them, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But then we have Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and since she is a daughter and not a son, her children have no titles. Now, something interesting to note on that, her husband is reportedly to have turned down an earldom when he married the Princess Royal, and so technically, if he had accepted that, his children could have the courtesy titles of being the children of an earl. And again, if you want more information on courtesy titles, definitely check out my video on what is an English lord. But even if he had accepted the earldom, her children would still not have HRH, prince and princess status, because they are the children of a daughter of the monarch and not a son. So here we already see direct grandchildren of Queen Elizabeth with no royal title. So let's pause for a minute and talk about Prince Edward's children, because something really interesting is going on there, which is that technically because he's a son, his children have the right to be HRH, prince or princess. But when he got married, he decided with his mother that he wanted to be styled an earl instead of a duke, and that he wanted his children to use the forms of address of the courtesy titles that an earl's children would have. So instead of his daughter being known as Her Royal Highness Princess Louise, she's known as Lady Louise Windsor. Meanwhile, his son gets to use his lesser title, which is a Viscount Severn, and he is known as James Viscount Severn, or would be called Lord Severn in normal everyday speech. Now, why would they do this? Well, they wanted to raise their children in a more normal lifestyle. They technically still have the right to those titles. And their mother has said in the press that when they turn 18, they get to choose whether they want to continue to be called Lady Louise and Lord Severn, or they could, if they wanted to, use their titles of HRH, Prince and Princess. So now let's talk about Charles's children a little bit, because as I said, they do both have the title. They are the sons of a son. But what's interesting is something else in that letter's patent about them, which was that the eldest living son of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales shall have at all times hold and enjoy the style. So, the eldest living son of the eldest living son of the Prince of Wales, well, who's that? Well, Prince Charles is the Prince of Wales, his oldest son is William, and William's oldest son is Prince George. So Prince George in this has been singled out to be able to be HRH, Royal Prince. But what about all of Prince George's siblings and his cousins, Archie and Archie's soon-to-be sister? What about them? Well, it continues. It says that, save as aforesaid the titles of Royal Highness, Highness, or Serene Highness, and the titular dignity of Prince and Princess shall cease, except those titles already granted and remaining unrevoked, and that the grandchildren of the sons of any such sovereign in the direct male line, save only the eldest living son of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales, shall have the style and title enjoyed by the children of dukes. Okay, there was so much in that, but basically what it's first saying is that there used to be all these other royal titles the members of the royal family at different generations would use, including just Highness versus Royal Highness. Also, Serene Highness, which is actually also the title Prince Albert had before he married Queen Victoria. And so for a second, what does HRH even mean? It means His or Her Royal Highness, and it is simply a term of respect and privilege used by members of the immediate royal family. And it's something that when marrying into the royal family, like Meghan and Kate did, since their husbands have it, they automatically get it because a wife takes on the precedence of her husband. But basically, it is just, you're at the top of the royalty clan here. And of course, in the 90s, Queen Elizabeth even had to issue a letters patent to take away HRH status from her divorced daughters-in-law of Princess Diana and, of course, the Duchess of York. It was, of course, a whole thing. People were very unhappy that she took HRH status away from Princess Diana. But again, you see how it's sort of like this is only for the super royal, and it's a big privilege to be HRH. But basically what King George was saying here is, I am simplifying things. I'm getting rid of all these random unnecessary titles, and I am limiting the number of people who get to use the titles that remain. So once you're out of the level of being a royal highness, you pretty much don't get a royal title anymore. And what's interesting is it even specifies that the grandchildren of the sons of any sovereign in the male line shall have the style and title enjoyed by the children of dukes. So, who are the grandchildren of the sons of any sovereign in the direct male line? Well, those would be William's other children. And if William's other children don't even get royal titles, then how much more so would Harry, who's not in the direct male line, not get titles? Of course, saving again the oldest son, Prince George. So according to this proclamation from 1917, the only person in that grandchild of Prince of Wales generation that gets a title is William's oldest son, Prince George. However, you might be saying, wait a second, but Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis also have the titles. What's going on here? And that is where the second patent comes in. And this was a patent issued while Kate Middleton was pregnant with Prince George in 20 2012. So let's delve into that. So in 2012 and 2013, when Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge was pregnant with Prince George, there was a problem that cropped up. The first one was about the line of succession and gender. So traditionally, how the line of succession, or the line of who gets to be king next, if the king dies, then who gets to be king next, right? That was traditionally favoring sons over daughters, brothers over sisters. So, for example, traditionally, if the monarch's oldest child was a girl, but then she had a younger brother, the brother would become king before she would become queen, because it would like skip over girls to the brother. Right? And so the question came up is this really fair in the 21st century? So out of this came the Act of Succession of 2013, which essentially stated that we're going by birth order, no matter if it is a boy or a girl. So if Prince George had been born a girl, then she would have become the next queen, even if she eventually had a younger brother. But of course, we know Prince George ended up being a boy. But it's still making changes because Princess Charlotte is now next in line after Prince George at the moment in the line of succession, even though they have an even younger brother, Prince Louis. What would have normally happened is Prince Louis would have knocked his sister down one and been right behind his brother, but because of this act, she is the first princess in British history to be ranking above her brother, which of course is great for girls in the line of succession, but this also created a problem with the titles, because remember, 1917 says that only the eldest son gets that HRH title in this generation. So if George had been a girl and then had a younger brother, and even though she would have eventually become queen, at birth, she wouldn't have a royal title. She would just be Lady first name, last name. Meanwhile, her younger brother, who's not even going to become king, is going to be HRH Prince. And of course, the solution that the Queen came up with to solve this problem was to issue a letters patent on the last day of December in 2012 that says this: "The Queen has been pleased by letters patent under the Great Seal of the Realm dated 31 December 2012 to declare that all the children of the eldest son of the Prince of Wales should have and enjoy the style, title, and attribute of Royal Highness with the titular dignity of Prince or Princess prefixed to their Christian names or with such other titles of honor." So basically what this is saying is that all of Prince William's children now get to have royal titles. And what's really interesting about this letters patent is that Queen Elizabeth is choosing to follow a precedent set by Queen Victoria in the late 1800s when faced with the same problem number 2 of 4 generations being alive at the same time. So let's talk about this 4 generations thing really quickly. So in 1898, Queen Victoria, who was the longest reigning monarch before Queen Elizabeth surpassed her recently, Queen Victoria was alive. Then her son, who's going to become king, was alive. And then her grandson, who was going to become the next king, was alive. And then her great-grandsons, who would become kings, were also alive. So 4 generations of the monarch and the next monarchs were all alive during the same time, which is a situation that doesn't actually happen that often in the British royal family. Seeing how the last time it happened was over 124 years ago shows how unoften this happens. So in 1898, when Queen Elizabeth's father was just a toddler and was alive, he was one of those princes who was initially not a royal highness. Well, Queen Victoria issued a letters patent that said that the children of the eldest son of any Prince of Wales shall have and at all times hold and enjoy the style, title, or attribute of Royal Highness in addition to their titular dignity of Prince or Princess prefixed to their Christian names. So basically, Queen Victoria issued the same exact letters patent as Queen Elizabeth did when faced with the same generational problem. So, editing Ellie here, who needs to pop in and answer a question. I was watching this video with my mother, who watches all my videos multiple times before and after they come out. Thanks for being my biggest fan, Mom. Anyway, she wanted to know, why did Queen Elizabeth have to issue the same patent that Queen Victoria did? Shouldn't it have already been in effect? And the answer to that is, of course, all about the 1917 letters patent issued by King George. pretty much Queen Victoria issues hers in 1898. King George V does his in 1917, which wipes out what she did, and so that's why Queen Elizabeth has to reissue it because King George wiped it out. Anyway, I hope that answers that question. And also, since I am already here, I wanted to say if you are enjoying this video, please bestow a like upon it. It would feel just so royal if you did. Which is another really important factor to remember when we start talking about Archie's title, which is that both Queen Victoria's letters patent and Elizabeth II's letters patent are concerned with one major thing, which is the line of succession, which is, of course, again, who's going to become the next king. And that's a really big important difference between Archie and his future sister and his cousins, Charlotte, Louis, and George. George is someday going to be the king, and Charlotte and Louis are going to both be the children of a king and also the siblings of a king. They are so much closer to the actual throne than the children of Harry, which is why, according to the tradition, they are given titles while the other grandchildren of the Prince of Wales, like Archie, are not. Because I think it's important to remember that George, Charlotte, and Louis would all have to die, abdicate, or become Catholic while also having no legitimate heirs in order for Archie to become king. And so that really does put him quite far from the monarchy, if you look at it that way. So this brings us all back to Archie then and his soon-to-be sister and their titles or their lack of titles. As we've seen going through all these letters patent, traditionally they would not have a title yet. But something very interesting is that when Prince Charles becomes king, they will now be the grandchildren of a king through a son, of course, Prince Harry. So at that point, they would automatically become HRH Prince Archie and HRH, whatever they end up naming their daughter. But basically, at that point, when Prince Charles becomes king, they would get those titles. So, could the Queen have given Archie a title if she wanted to? The answer is yes, she totally could have. She could have issued a letters patent. I think the most logical letters patent she could have issued was simply saying that all the grandchildren of the Prince of Wales get to have titles, seeing how they will have one when he becomes king. It would make logical sense, I think, for that patent to happen. But she did not, and she was not breaking tradition at all by not issuing that patent. Rather, she was following tradition both of 1917 and also of 1898 with Queen Victoria. So, which I think goes back to the interview of Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, with Oprah, where she was saying like, oh, well, Archie should traditionally have had the royal title. And people are saying, no, you're wrong. Traditionally, as we've looked at, like with the different letters patent and with historical examples both from Victoria and George V, that Archie at this point in time would not have that title. He will of course have that title when his grandfather becomes king. Now, am I saying that Meghan is wrong? No, because I think one thing is that editing, I feel like what she said could have been edited to leave out really important connecting factors of what she's talking about, or her brain could have edited it. I know as like a YouTuber, I'll leave something like really important connecting factor out of my videos just because I know it so well that I forget everyone else isn't going to make that connection. So it looks like a disconnect when in reality I'm like, I'm sorry, I forget other people don't know all the stuff in my head. And so I think the same thing could have also been happening to Meghan, and I just think people should give people the benefit of the doubt there. But also, something really interesting that Meghan said was that she was indicating that it was beyond the Queen just not giving him a title now, that there was actually possibly talk of them changing the 1917 letters patent so that Archie would never get a title. So for example, if they went in and changed it and they said that the grandsons of a king through younger sons, obviously not the older son of Prince William, but younger sons like Harry, if they changed it so that the younger son's children did not have titles, then Archie would never get a title, even if Charles became king. And so I thought that was a really interesting part of the interview because that would be definitely breaking with tradition. So some media outlets are connecting this to the fact that perhaps Prince Charles wants a more like slimmed down royal family, because when you have a lot of royals running around, there's a lot of people that can bring shame and ostracism on the royal family, like some have done. And so he wants to have a more slimmed down royal family. So of course, I don't know how much of that is connected to what Meghan was saying, but it's one possibility. I mean, that would be a very serious thing. I think if they were to change the 1917 letters patent in order to take away Archie's chance for a title in the future, I could see why Meghan would be very upset about that. So just to sum all of this up, the British royal family pretty much has rules about who gets titles and who doesn't. They're really old, from over 100 years ago, and traditionally Archie would not be a prince at this time. He would currently become a prince when his grandfather becomes king if they don't change it to take it away from him before then. Yeah, that is it all summed up pretty much. So let me know in the comments below if you think Archie should have a title or not. I personally think it would have made sense for the Queen to issue that letters patent, making him a prince, because I mean, he's eventually going to get it in a number of years. I don't see the point of him waiting till he's a little bit older to have that title. But I'm also not the Queen, so there we have that. Anyway, again, my name is Ellie Dashwood, and this is my channel where we talk about literature, history, and royal titles, apparently. Anyway, all of you guys have an awesome day. Bye!